I continue from our part three. In this part, we're going to focus on the wrap-up code. In any contact center, wrap-up code is very vital for multiple purposes. Wrap-up code basically provides a quick way to summarize the valuable information, such as any complaints, wrong numbers, or orders about an interactions. In most scenario, every queue has a set of wrap-up code assigned to it. Now, agents are required to select an appropriate wrap-up code at the end of each interaction during the after call work or ACW time. Supervisors track wrap-up code for reporting purposes and use those codes to determine why the customer is contacting the organization or even further classify the contact type or reasons. Now, the wrap-up code must be created before you configure the queue so that it can be assigned to that particular queue. To configure wrap-up code, an administrator can create a global wrap-up code under the contact center wrap-up codes. After creating the codes, administrator will then add them to the individual queue so that the agent can select the code after the interaction ends. Now, agent can assign only one wrap-up code per interactions. So if I am logged in as an agent and I want to log out and I need to select a wrap-up code, I can only select one at a time. Keep the name as short as possible so that it can fit in the selection dialog box, usually under 30 characters, for example. The best practice is to configure 15 or fewer wrap-up code per queue to ensure the agent can see all of them. Because if you have a list of wrap-up code, sometimes agent may not be able to see all of them. So a couple of classic examples of wrap-up code could be, for example, let's say meeting, end of shift, small break, customer complaint, or inquiry, or maybe, I don't know, just simply say idle time or me time, something like that. After call work is a concept when an agent hang up the call. There is a certain duration that is given to the agent for him or her to complete that call or take a note before they can answer the next call. The short form ACW, which is the work that an agent performs immediately following the interactions or the call. Work may involve selecting a wrap-up code, updating customer information in the database, taking notes, filling out forms, or initiating an outbound interactions. Usually as a metric, it indicates the total time an agent takes to finish working on that particular call. Now, if the ACW is a requirement before handling the next interaction, then the Genesys Cloud factors the ACW in average handle time, because sometimes you may need to create a call, kind of like a concept called AHT, average handle time for a call for further calculation. So if you are going to use the ACW concept or after call work concept, then you need to take that duration as part of your average call handle time. Now, ACW or after call work has four different options: optional, mandatory with discretionary, mandatory time box, and mandatory time box with no early exit. Now, the first one we're going to talk about, if I can get my pen working, the optional. Optional is basically gives the agent an option to choose. So choosing this option basically allows agent to opt out of selecting wrap-up code after a call. Optional ACW feature is useful if your organization does not really use wrap-up code and your agent do not need it after the call work time. It does not limit the amount of time an agent spends on the ACW or after call work before going back to being available to receive the next available call. So the supervisor need to monitor the ACW metric closely for their agent. The next one you have is called the mandatory discretionary. For this option, agent choose how long to remain in after call work status, but is required to enter a wrap-up code before finish and becoming available again. As with the optional setting, there is no limit on how long an agent can spend on ACW. They can spend as long as they want. Like if I go into, let's say, select a wrap-up code, and I could spend like 5 minutes if I want to. Now you got to be careful because some agent might take that into like a misuse that. They might unnecessarily take some time when they should not have. Now the third one is called a mandatory time box. This is where you set a maximum amount of time that agent may remain in ACW state to complete their work after work. Basically what it means is that if I hang up the call, it's going to give me 20 seconds, not 20 minutes, 20 seconds for me to complete the call as an agent, complete a task or whatever. Like it could be note taking, filling up a form, or closing a database, or files, whatever, within that 20 seconds. So it's a time box. If the agent finished the work early, agent can receive a new interaction or new call by entering the wrap-up code. The agent automatically becomes available at the end of that specific time. So after the 20 seconds, the agent automatically become part of the queue, even if he or she is still working on the previous call. The system will assign a wrap-up code of in wrap-up timeout, which is basically a tag. And if agent does not select a code, it will select a tag automatically. And that tag is called in wrap-up. So it should be wrap-up timeout. So that what was going to happen is manager or supervisor will know, okay, this person probably is exceeding too many in wrap up timeout, so that maybe we need to either increase the time, or maybe we have to retrain the agent saying, look, you got to finish your task within that 20 seconds because you're hitting that in wrap up timeout frequently, right? So this is something that you want to monitor from a time to time. Then you have some last one called mandatory time box with no early exit. The behavior is same as the previous one, where it will timed. However, except the agent cannot become available for the next interaction until a specific time has completed. That means in the previous one, if I had 20 seconds, and let's say I finish the work in 15 seconds and I choose a wrap-up code, what's going to happen is I will become immediately available part of the new call, queue to receive a new call. But the last one is that no, I gotta wait that 20 seconds for me to start accepting new calls. So mandatory time box, no early exit basically dictate that the agent must wait for the entire 20 seconds to complete, even if he or she is not doing anything, before they can answer the call again. Now, this feature often is useful to give an agent something called cooldown period between the interaction. Sometimes the agent could become quite overwhelmed with a lot of calls, so you want to give them a little bit of a room to say, okay, you know what, just relax. Even if you have finished your previous call, you closed it, we're still going to give you 10 to 15 seconds to take a breath, maybe fix your makeup or hair or whatever you want to do, right? So these basically could be useful for that scenario. Next topic is called the ACD queue configurations. The ACD queues, which we'll talk about how to assign the queue and then assign all those settings that we've talked about. Queues are extremely important in a streamlined customer interactions. When a call comes in, it goes into the queue and it makes two possible outcome from that. One, either it selects an agent, or if agent is not available, it stays in the queue. So Genesys Cloud collects the data about the customer interaction from the queue and provides a valuable feedback on effectiveness of the contact center. As such, that you must understand how to establish a good foundation for your configuration queue. Now, you must define the following options when it comes to creating the queue: wrap-up code, evaluation method, which we talked about in I believe section part 2 or 1, where we talk about all the skills matching, best available skills or disregard skills, and of course the routing method, which is either standard ACD or bullseye ACD. So to create a name for the queue, you would first go to the contact center queue, and then you define a queue name. The queue name could be any arbitrary name. However, you want to keep a meaningful name so that someone who's non-technical person looking at it could immediately understand that that queue is for a particular purposes. I'm going to create a queue called sales queue, and therefore I'm going to name it as sales queue. You can call it sales West Coast, sales East Coast, sales Asia, sales Africa, however you want to do that. Then here you can define the after call word. This is where we talked about the wrap-up code, right? Either optional, mandatory, optional, mandatory discretionary, mandatory time boxed, or mandatory with no time box with no early exit. Now, if you're going to choose the time box, the last two options, then you're going to select that and you're going to specify the time right here. This is where you're going to specify 20 seconds, 13 seconds, or whatever the amount that your company has decided. Now, description is an optional, although it is very good practice to create a proper description scheme so that you can easily identify what the purpose of that would be. Now, once you define the general information, our next step is to select the routing sections. So this is where the routing tab comes in. This is where we are going to define whether we're going to choose a standard routing or advanced routing. Now, keep in mind though, because by the time you may be watching this video or by the time you probably go and configure this, interface may be changed. This is one of the drawback of any web-based platform, is that their interfaces might change without any notifications to you. So what you're looking for, however, is the name tied routing, and it could be either on the top bar, it could be on right here. It might change. So just look for the topic that we're looking at. So routing method, you're going to choose either all skills matching, best available skills, or disregard skills and next agent, followed by the assigning the members to the queue or the agent. So you'll go to group a member. You can either select a member based on individual name by selecting the users, and then you specify the username into that. Now you can search the username, if you know them, or if you are going to assign it based on a group, you may have created a group called Sales West Coast, and you have assigned 20 agent into that particular group. You could go to the group and assign based on the group as well. If you have a large number of agents, it probably makes sense to use group-based assignment. That way it's easy to manage rather than individual. Now, followed by wrap-up code. If you have created the wrap-up code, you would go to the wrap-up code and select whatever the wrap-up code you want the agent to have. Now, of course, you should have no more, try to stick to around close to 15, not more than that, because then the agent may not have enough room to see all of them. So what happened is you're going to select maybe average 4 and 5. It could be like meeting, end of shift, smoke, lunch break, nature break, whatever you want, so that if I'm an agent and I need to step away from my desk, for example, I could select a wrap-up code saying I'm going out for a break, or a customer hang up the call and the customer was very rude, maybe he or she had a complaint, and you want to end that call with a wrap-up code called complaint, or it could be just simply a normal call, end the call with the normal wrap-up code. So whatever it is, make sure you create them in advance, then you assign them right about here. Now, under the voice area, this is where you can define some caller ID settings, like for example, the name. If in case there's a call that initiated from the queue to outbound, you want to see where the call came from. So you will say call came from sales queue. You want to specify alerting time, that's the ringing time. And then of course, any whisper settings. Now we'll talk about the whisper stuff later in the course, so we're not going to worry about that right now. And then you're going to say that service level target, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And what you want is that you want to be able to achieve all your call or answer all your call within that 20 seconds, 80% of the time. So you want to create a service level agreement saying that out of 100 calls, 80 calls should be answered within that, whatever the 20 seconds, 10 seconds that you define here. This is kind of the offering a service level agreement for your customer. For each type of media type that you have, you enter a percentage of interaction that you want the answers within that target. The number of seconds the call should be answered after they have been transferred to the queue. The name and the phone number, of course, not a mandatory, but you can, if you want your customer to see the caller ID when calling on behalf of the queue, then you want to provide that information. Now, keep in mind that for each media type that you enter, the number of seconds interaction should be alerted agent's client user interface before it times out. Then it will roll back to the queue. So alerting time say that if the 20 seconds, if the agent does not answer the call, bring the call back to the queue, right? So this way you could kind of create, like bring the call back and in case the agent does not respond. Callback. Now, when creating a queue, you can also configure callback channel settings using the callback tab, which is right about here. And as an admin, you can allow the agent to take ownership of a callback by enabling allow agent to take ownership callback option. I'll show you where that is done. By enabling these options, you ensure that one-to-one relationship between the agent and a customer. If an agent who owns a callback is not available during the scheduled period of time, then the callback will be removed from the queue and gets disconnected. All scheduled callback will be routed to the next available agent unless you enable these options. Now, routing configuration. We will discuss more details about the routing configuration in the next part.